Hi class, so welcome back to these online lessons. I'm sorry that there was a break in between. I was a little caught up with some stuff, so I wasn't able to record the lesson. So today we're going to talk about a very important aspect in any kind of communication when you're writing in English. This is one element that is used all the time, and um, they're called articles. So there are three articles in English: a, an, and the. Right now, on the face of it, they may be very simple to understand, but based on the papers that you've submitted, and also based historically on evaluating so many papers over the last 14, 15 years, and also interacting with people who are learning English. This is a problem for a lot of speakers who don't speak English as a native language, and especially learners in India, because Indian languages don't have this concept of articles. Like, you don't have this in Hindi, and you don't have this in, as far as I know, we don't have this in any Indian language. Maybe there are some exceptions, but generally Indian languages don't have the concept of articles, right? So it's very difficult for someone who's learning as English as a second language to understand how exactly to use these articles, right? And a lot of times when you submit your papers and journals and conferences, the editorial team would send your paper back, citing the reason that you've made a lot of grammatical errors, and often, more often than not, a lot of those errors would be errors related to articles. So what kind of errors could you make? You could use an article when there is no article required. That is one kind of error. Another kind of error is you don't use an article where it is required. Or the third kind of error is when you use an incorrect article, where one article is required but you've used another one instead. And that could end up changing the meaning of a sentence. So we have a few examples over here. So the first one is we conducted a research. So what's the article here? We're using a, the article A. Now, of course, when I emphasize it, I would say a, and when I emphasize this word here, I would say the. But generally, when we speak in day-to-day language, they're pronounced in a different way. Okay, they have a weak form which is used. So this is pronounced as a, this is pronounced as an, and this is pronounced as the before consonant sounds and the before vowel sounds. But we're not concerned with the pronunciation in this lesson because we are mainly dealing with academic writing. So this remains the same. The pronunciation is different, but the spelling remains the same. But sometimes people get confused between a and an. So while I pronounce them, when I am emphasizing on them, I would say a and an, and I would call this the. But please don't consider that the pronunciation when you read that word in a sentence, right? So if I'm reading it here, I would say we conducted a research. Is how I would pronounce it, right? So just clarifying that pronunciation doesn't make a difference, but don't get confused because of the way I pronounce them sometimes. So if I'm reading a sentence, I would say but if I'm emphasizing it, I would say a. Okay, so just keep that in mind. So we conducted a research. So the a is used here. Then the second sentence, the Newton's third law is easy. So I've got I'm using the here. And then there was delay in reaction of compounds. So this is something that you would, these are the kind of sentences that you use in your research writing, right? So here there is no article in this sentence, right? Now all these three sentences are not written in the best way possible, right? So let's look at the correct way of writing this. So now here, this is not right. So you don't need an article here. We conducted research. Or maybe you could use maybe a word like some. We conducted some research, right? So we'd understand why the A research is not considered the best way to write it, right? The Newton's third law is easy. Again, you don't need it's just Newton's third law is easy, right? Because you've already specified which law, Newton's third law, right? You don't need to add the here. So we'll talk about articles in detail, but I'm just pointing out some of the common errors that you can find. So here, you've used an article where you should not have used an article. here again you've used another article where you should not have used an article, and here there was delay, right? There was delay. There's no article used here, but you need one. There was a delay, right? There was one delay. In reaction of compounds, so in the reaction of compounds, right? And if it's some specific compounds that we're talking about, then maybe you need another the here, right? So today we're going to understand what is this all about, because a lot of people, in all the papers that I'm checking, one of the common errors that I find, and one of the most frequent errors that I find, is that of articles, So we're going to try and fix that today. We're going to try and at least understand the logic of using articles, and maybe with some practice you will be able to get better at this. Alright, so we want to understand a little bit about articles first. So one of the characteristics of an article of all articles is that they have to be used before a noun. Okay, you cannot have an article if there is no noun following it. So that's one thing that you need to understand, and a lot of times the article that we use depends on the noun that follows. Okay, so we'll take a few more examples, and sometimes you can find adjectives as well, but then that adjective has to be followed by a noun, or an adverb followed by an adjective followed by a noun. So we'll look at that one by one. So the first one is just a simple noun. So you've got a survey. So if you're conducting a survey, you would say a survey, right? So here we're just looking at how nouns work with articles, right? So you've got a noun here. An experiment. Again, there is a noun here. Now, why have we used a here and an here? This is something that we'll try and understand in this using these examples. So here, so we're using a survey because this word begins with an S, right? Begins with the S sound, right? So one thing we need to understand is it's not always just the letter, but the sound that it produces, which is very important. But in this case, they're both consonants. S and S, they're both consonants, right? So before a consonant, you would use A, and before a vowel, because this one is, so A, E, I, O, U, these are your 5 vowels, right? These are your 5 vowels, but we're more interested in the sounds that they produce, because that determines which article we would use, right? With the, it doesn't make a difference while writing. While speaking, it makes a difference, but we're not going to get into that, right? So a survey, but an experiment, right? Now we look at the next example, an inclusive survey, right? So again, we've got the noun here, but here we've got an adjective as well. So the article is separated from the noun by this adjective, right? Now here we've written a survey, but here we've written an. Why is that? Because it's not the noun here, but the next word, which is the article, which determines it. Again, you see, it's a vowel, so you have an inclusive survey, right? The next one, again, it's experiment, but longitudinal experiment. L is a consonant, L, the sound that it produces, so you got a longitudinal survey, experiment, right? So this is how you determine whether you have to use a or you have to use an, depending on the sound that the next word produces, right? Sometimes you can have, so the noun is here now, resource, piece of work, that's it's a phrase, it's a noun phrase, right? So you got piece of work, you've got resource. Now these are separated from the article, right? So the article is quite far away, which is fine. But you see that this word here is functioning as an adjective. It's a utilized resource, but marginally utilized resource. So you've got an adjective here, you've got an adverb here. So sometimes you may find this kind of a structure where you've got an adverb followed by an adjective followed by a noun. But the important thing here is that, again, there has to be a noun. So sometimes you say, oh, we can use an article before an adverb, or we can use an article before an adjective. But the point is that you always have a noun at the end. Otherwise, you cannot use articles, right? So that noun is what determines what kind of article you use. Of course, between a and an, that's determined by the next word. But whether you use a or whether a or an are the same category. It's just that you're using different ones for vowels and different ones for consonants, right? But the 3 categories we're talking about are a, an, that's one category. The second category is the, and the third category is no article. Right? So these are the 3 categories we're talking about, and figuring out which of these needs to be used, right? Which of these needs to be used will be determined by the type of noun in the sentence. Okay, and that's what we need to understand, and that's what we'll try and understand better today. Okay, Between a and an, of course, the next word will tell you whether it's inclusive, so that's an, and it's an L here, so it's an A. So that between the a and an contrast is something which the next word will tell you. But which category of out of these do we have to use is something that the noun will tell us, and we'll try and understand that now in the next slide, if you can call it that. So the first question you need to ask before you use articles is, I mean, of course, you've got a noun, right? And it's only when you have a noun that you'll need an article. Otherwise, you won't need an article. So you need to look at that noun. And you need to ask yourself, is this something specific? Or is it something non-specific, which means it's something general, right? Non-specific. Now, how do we identify what this specific or non-specific thing is, right? This is how most grammar books will tell you, like, if it is a specific noun, you use the. If it is a non-specific noun, you use a or an. And of course, this is a little more complicated than this, but sometimes you can use a and an, sometimes you don't use any article. But if it's specific, you use the, right? So let's look at this aspect first. Let's understand what we mean by this word specific, because sometimes it's not very clear to people what this word means. All right. Right. So I've got these two people here. We can call this. I mean, you can see that drawing is not my forte. Like, I'm probably the worst artist in the world. Worst sketcher in the world. But yeah, let's assume that these two people are talking to each other, right? So they're communicating. So this person's saying something to this person saying something to this person, right? And this is like a face-to-face conversation. And of course, let's assume they've got enough distance to prevent the virus from spreading, right? That's very important. So when they're talking to each other, they have to use certain rules to figure out what is specific, what is not. This is the same thing when you're writing a paper, right? So imagine that you're the person writing the paper, and this is the whole community that is reading your paper, right? So you're the author or the researcher, and these are your readers, okay? Whoever is going to pick up, whoever you think is going to pick up your paper and read it, right? Of course, there may be a chance that a lay person may pick it up and read it, and maybe that person does not understand so much about your work. But I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about the general scientific community that you're writing for, right? People who would normally download your paper, or when you submit it in a journal, people would read that journal, read articles from that journal. The general community in your discipline. We're talking about those people, right? So you've written a paper and these people are reading it. Now, how do we know if something is specific or not, right? That's a little confusing sometimes. I mean, at least I find it confusing. And I find an easier way to understand this is to ask the question, if both these people, so if you're writing, if you're the author, and let's say I'm the reader, or anyone is the reader, right? You need to ask yourself, do both of us know what is being spoken about, right? For example, let's take the word, so we've got some space here. Let's take the word research, right? Now, this is a noun. Now, we could be talking about any research in this world, right? Or it could be some specific research. It could be one particular research somewhere that you are conducting in your office or in your lab, or on the street. It could be a social survey, social experiment, whatever. So you're conducting this research, right? And it's a specific research, and maybe you've mentioned this before, right? So that's the whole thing. That's the whole thing we got to talk about. Now, this word research can be used as a general research that could be one of many projects that are happening across the world. Or it could be a specific one that you're talking about, right? Now, whenever you mention that, if you frame a sentence like, the results of research have been uploaded, right? The results of, so I'm just going to pull this up a little bit. Okay, let me do that. All right. I hope you can see that. Right, here you go. All right. So the results of, so I've left a blank here, research have been uploaded, right? Now, how do we know if this is a specific research or not? So the question is now again, you're writing this, you're writing the paper, right? And you need to assume that people are going to read. Of course, people are going to read your paper, right? Now you need to ask yourself: do both these people, like the person who's reading my paper, the general population that's reading my paper, and and I. So do both of us know which research we're talking about? So if I'm saying the results of a research have been uploaded, which I'm assuming here that both of us don't know which research. It's some research that's been published, some results have been published, but we don't know. I know maybe, but this person does not. There's no way this person would know which research I'm talking about. It's just any research, right? In this case, I would have to use the. But let's assume for a moment that this person knows which research you're talking about. Then you can use the. So that is the fundamental use of the in English. So if you're saying the, you're basically saying that, hey, you should know which research I'm talking about, or I'm assuming that you know that you know which research I'm talking about. And that's where the mistake happens. If you say the, then the reader will assume that he's supposed to know or she's supposed to know which research this is talking about, right? And if they don't, then there's miscommunication. That's why they consider it bad writing, because you could have used a research, or you could have said just research. The results of again. So is it A? I mean, I remember that in the first example I mentioned that a research is not right. So yeah. But here we are focusing on the, right. The results of the research have been uploaded, right? So if you say this, it means that you're assuming that both the writer, which is you, and the reader, which is the general community, know what you're talking about, right? So there are many ways in which you can. There are many indications that the general community out there would know what you're talking about. Now I'll take a few non-academic examples to simplify this for you. So for example, if I say the sun is shining, right? Now, if I say the sun is shining, why am I using the sun here, right? Now again, you've got those two people talking to each other. You've written the paper. People are generally reading. Now, most people who are reading this paper are on Earth, right? Or they know where Earth is. And with respect to the Earth, there's only one sun. There's only one. So there's no scope for confusion. If I'm saying the sun, I mean, unless of course you specifically want to say the sun in some other solar system, and then it's different. But in general, if you're not specifying things, then if you write the sun, then it's assumed that you're talking about the sun that's in our solar system, right? So that's one. Okay. So one is when something is unique, right? Something is unique. You know that both of you would know what that is because there's only one of it, right? That's the simplest. The second one is when you've mentioned something before, right? Mentioned something before, right? So you say, for example, we conducted an experiment. So you see how I've used an before the next word, which is e. So it's experiment, so an experiment. Now the next sentence, now I can say the experiment was successful. So why am I saying the now, the experiment? Now why am I saying that? Why am I using the, the definite article here? Why am I using this? Because I've already mentioned in the previous sentence that we conducted an experiment. So the first time I'm mentioning something, I cannot say the because the reader does not know which experiment I'm talking about. First I need to tell them that I conducted an experiment, right? And then we tell them that the experiment that I conducted. So now they know which experiment, right? So now both the reader and the listener, or the reader and the writer, right, or the speaker and the listener. The same rules apply even when you speak. So the speaker and the listener, or the reader and the writer, have both now. I mean, they both know now which experiment you're talking about. So you can use this. So when you've mentioned something before, not long ago, but in the immediate context, So you've mentioned something before, so people understand. So it's the same thing that we're talking about, right? Okay, now point number three, we got some space here. Um, Point number three is when the context is understood. Okay, the context is understood. What do we mean by the context being understood, right? So, um, for example, there are many prime ministers in this world, right? But if I tell you that if I give you a sentence like the PM announced lockdown, right? The PM announced a lockdown. So here now we know that we are conducting this lesson at IIT Delhi, right? So we're all of us in India, and therefore when I say the PM, contextually based on our context, we know which PM we're talking about. We're talking about the Prime Minister of India, right? Let me try and give you another example. If I say, um, if I say I'm missing the classroom, right? I'm missing the classroom. So now there are many classrooms in the world. There are many universities. So here, you see, I mean, if someone does not know this context, the person will say, which classroom are you talking about, right? But because I'm talking to you and you know we've met in only one classroom before, right? So you know which classroom we're talking about. We're talking about the classroom where the HSL 800 classes happen, right? So the context, because we know the context, we understand when I say I'm missing the classroom, right? Um, so here you would understand this, but someone else who's watching these videos may not understand which classroom we're talking about, but they can assume that we're talking about one particular classroom, right? Now these are three methods, and there's another one, right? I will try to fit it into this this screen, okay? All right, so I'm gonna put this over here. So one is so in all these cases, you know, so either it was something unique, so there's no confusion, or you've mentioned it before, so you made it clear what you're talking about, or the context is known. Sometimes the context is not known, right? For example, if someone else is watching this video and I want to explain which classroom I'm talking about, then I can say, I miss the classroom, or classroom where, classroom in IIT Delhi where the HSL 800 classes were conducted, right? So this is the passive voice again. I mean, we're not going into that, but just pointing it out for you. So the passive voice is being used now. I'm saying I'm missing the classroom. Again, I've said the classroom, but this is not for you guys. This is for all the people who are wondering from the previous sentence. Like when I said I'm missing the classroom, they say which classroom, right? So then I say I missed the classroom at IIT Delhi where the HSL 800 classes were conducted. So what have I done here? I have clarified the context, right? I've given specific, detailed instructions so that people now know which classroom I'm talking about. So it all boils down to the same thing. So I'm going to draw those people here. So it's one person, and there's another person, right? Horrible drawing, and they're very close to each other. That's not social distancing, right? So we will move them away, and so now they're fairly far from each other, so now they can speak. So this person, so this is you as the author, and this is the general reading community, right? When community from your discipline, right? And there are these 4 ways in which you can make sure that both you and this person know what is being spoken about. Okay? Do both of these people know what is being spoken about? Is it unique? So the 4 questions you need to ask are, is it unique? Is it something unique? There's only one of it. There's no way we can get confused. Use the, right? The second one is, you've mentioned it before. Have I said this before in the paper? In the previous line, I've mentioned what I'm talking about? Sure. Then the reader knows what I'm talking about. I can use the, right? The third one is the context known? Based on the context, as a reader, have the readers attended a seminar that I attended? So can I use the name of that speaker and say, oh, the speaker was very good because all of us attended this lecture together? That's one. Or if not, and if you still want to make something specific, then um, you can specify with clear instructions. Okay, so now I don't want to make this video very long. I know that this was due on Monday, so which is fine. So we're running late, which is okay, but I'm going to upload another video tomorrow, which will be a continuation of articles, because today we've only spoken about the specific article, and that too there are some examples to be discussed, and we'll take a few examples to understand this better. But for now, just try to understand this little bit about the specific article, and tomorrow I'm going to upload another one with which continues on this discussion that we've had. And after that, on Monday, we will have a test which checks your knowledge of articles. Okay, so because this is very important, it is one of the most commonly made errors, and it's very difficult to correct for a lot of people, right? So if you understand it correctly, take the time, maybe watch it 2 or 3 times. And we will be sharing some links with you and some examples. I'll get either Vyom or Nandan to send those examples for you, practice exercises, so you can practice them. But just wait for watch this and then wait for another continuation video. So maybe we'll have 2 continuation videos based on how much time is required for me to explain things properly. And then we'll have the evaluation on Monday. So hope all of you are fine. Please don't stress yourselves out. These online classes. I know that some of you don't have internet connections and you're struggling with appearing for evaluations. We'll consider all of that. This is just an effort to keep the learning going while we're all stuck in our houses and quarantined. And so be safe. Watch this and reach out to me if you have any questions. And once we've got the next couple of videos up, if you have more questions, then I can address. So if you have questions based on this video, you can let me know so that I can upload. I can include those points in the next video as well. So please keep the interactions going. Watch it whenever you can. All right. So that's all for today. We'll stop here. It's a longish video, but that's all right. So I hope you don't get bored. You're at the end of the video, so I hope you didn't get bored. But yeah, we'll see you again soon. Thank you. Be safe and good luck.